Hello everybody, my name is Mike and I love maps. Today we'll be doing a video on how to draw fantasy maps, and particularly how to draw elements fantasy maps. This time I'll be doing swamps. I've done quite a few videos now. Well, I guess if you count two is quite a few. I'm trying to improve each one as I go. But the idea is to get the information out there so everybody can enjoy it. I've changed my camera angle with a contraption I put together, and I've added some music so that it fills in the dead space. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Let's get right into it. As always, you want to get a clean sheet of paper and draw circles into it, just like the one I have down here. Doesn't have to be a circle, it could be anything, just the idea is you want to create yourself a little space for your exercise. Once again, this is not going to be a full map, just an exercise. You want to clear off your space with a brush, make sure you get rid of all the particulates. Today I will be using Micron, not micro. My Micron archival ink pen #1, my very favorite. And then the smallest tip I have, the Micron archival ink 005, which is a tip so small it is 0.2 of a millimeter. I'm sorry, 0.02 of a millimeter. It's super tiny. It's okay to use pencil for any of these exercises. I use a Bic Mechanical because, hey, it's just what I'm comfortable with. But you can use anything. And if you are going to use pencil, I highly recommend a Staedtler Mars plastic. It prevents smudging and smearing. So we're just going to go start over here. I'm going to grab my #1. Now, swamps are in low areas. And low areas collect water. So I always start by actually drawing in little puddles. I set my puddles at an oblique angle because it makes it feel more depressed. So the idea is that I'm not drawing a puddle from up above, but you can do that if you want to. I just do it outside here. You could always do it that way. It kind of seems like a blob, to me anyway. And since the angle of the maps that I use suggests that you're looking at it at a 45-degree angle from the air as opposed to directly overhead, that's what I like to stick with. So yeah, you just make a little squiggly line and then kind of a little depression. You just want to kind of make it organic. I put the water down first because it helps kind of define where the swamp area is. If you don't want puddles in your swamp, no problem. I like to show it though. Next, this is the simplest symbol, and this symbol represents marshlands for every USGS map. I'll draw it over here again. If you see that on a map, that means marshlands, and people will recognize it. You can go ahead and just use that symbol straight up, and people will know what it means. I like using a more organic version, just like that. To me, that looks more like marsh grass. I'm just going to start putting those. It's 3 quick flicks. And the reason I try and do it close to the same every time is because when you're reading a map, you're not actually looking at a 100% accurate photographic picture of something. You're looking at almost a book or a story that you're trying to read. People turn those symbols into things that they understand. So when they see this, they've been conditioned to understand, like reading a word, that kind of means marshland. And there you go. That is a swamp, ready to go. Sometimes I like to put a little shadow at the base of my marsh grass, but not always. It's really up to you. Now, marshes are very dynamic places, and some people like to add more flourishes and embellishments. I say that's great. The ocean isn't the only place that's mysterious and has monsters in it. I think one of the most classic monsters or embellishments you can put on a map is a crocodile. Now, I did this crocodile ahead of time, and my next crocodile may not look the same, but we're going to try. One of the things you need to remember if you're going to put embellishments on a map, especially if it's ones portraying animals or anything like that, is that it's not necessarily going to fit the scale, unless you've got a really big map. All the maps I've been drawing lately have been on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So in order to fit information on that map, I've had to play around with scale. Just know that embellishments are there to convey a feeling and not meant to actually fit to scale. Okay? And people intuitively know that. So, with the crocodile, or alligator as you prefer, I always start with the nose. I just do a little hump right there with the nose. Okay? Doesn't have to be perfect, just something like that. A ledge. We're starting at the tip and working back. Then a hump for the eye. Alright? And then I like doing a second hump for the eye. That's a classic alligator shape. Next thing I like to do is just kind of have him dissolve into the background. That's kind of his shoulder. We'll see here in a second. Now, alligators submerge themselves in water. Swamp water is kind of murky. I like to put little murky lines. Alright. Next thing you can do is pick one of these humps to be the leading eye. If you pick the forward one right here, it looks like he's looking this way. If you pick this one, it looks like he's looking this way. But only fill in one eye socket. Just like that. Alright? I know it made it look easy, but it actually is kind of hard because I'm having to draw it at a weird oblique angle to the camera. And then once you pick that, just make a little dot for the nose. There you go. Now, the alligator's not finished until there's kind of a hump showing his back. And then finally, you want to give something to the tail. This is not necessarily the most anatomically correct alligator, but it's a suggestion of one. Another great thing you can do for alligators too is if you just don't want to show anything else, draw a little water line, draw an angle like that, draw a snout, and then draw what looks like an eye or an eye hump. And just a little dot right there. And then finally you can throw a couple of teeth down and then a couple of reciprocating teeth right here. That will always be recognized, at least on most maps, as an alligator opening his mouth up to catch something out of the water. Okay? Other embellishments that you can throw down, one I really like, especially if you're doing a marshy swamp area, is cattails. Now, I haven't used my .05. Like I said, I really like my number 1 a lot. So let's go ahead and use that. Because marshes, they're kind of weedy and wet, and the best way I've found to really, make that stick out is to use really fine lines. For whatever reason, it gives kind of a wet, visceral, tactile sense. So here's my number, .005. And it doesn't matter either way you can use it. You just make long strings. Like that. I try to work in 3s or 5s. My art teacher back in middle school taught me this principle about odds. If it has an odd number to it, it seems organic and it seems more natural. So whenever you can, try to work in odds or primes whenever you're trying to show something that looks like a bush or a tree. Anyway, you got your mess of little fronds down there, and then just quick little circles, and then just flick the end ever so gently. There you have it. Cattails are some kind of watery plant. Most of them don't bend over so far. Classically, people like to see them standing up a little bit. Maybe they're orchids. Just like that. Last, I'm going to show you guys swamp trees. Here's some other embellishments I did earlier about birds. I won't go over them right now because they take time and I really don't know how to express some of it. I'll go over those in another video talking about embellishments specifically. But the important thing to remember is that any embellishment you put in should help enhance and not distract. I prefer to use silhouettes when I can and very, very tiny details. But really it's up to you. The last thing I wanted to show you though was something I didn't cover here in the alligator part is trees. Swamps have trees. And I'm going to go back to my number 1 for this one. If you're using pencil, once again, don't worry about it. That's why I like using the Bic. It's a pretty thin point and allows you to get some really good detail in there. Get that hair out of the way. So when I start with a tree in a swamp, I always start with the trunk. And I make it a pretty distinctive trunk. Now this would be what I would call a medium-sized tree for what I would be making a map. I know that's not very scientific, but that's how I classify it. Anyway, after that, you really just want to kind of make squiggly branches, and you want them kind of to trail off. Alright? Now that by itself, in a swampy atmosphere that you've created with your marsh grass and a puddle, that already looks like a swamp tree. You can also make smaller swamp trees. I lean on the look of a weeping willow and have that make that kind of droopy, mossy, squiggly, humpy thing. Yes, I just said it. Droopy, mossy, squiggly, humpy thing. I apologize. Whenever I start doing these videos, my vocabulary goes out the window. In any case, as you can see, still spending time making squiggly lines. Swamps are vibrant places full of life, but in our minds they're mysterious and dark. It's the meeting of wood and water, and so you want to kind of evoke that when you're making your map. So there it is, a stand of swamp trees, perhaps even some of the roots are submerged out in some swampy little delta lake. Maybe some snakes are escaping. I don't know. Trying to give some texture. Doing this all on the fly. There you go. Those were small. This was large without foliage. It's the same thing, really. If you want to do a closer version, or you want your trees to show more character, it just gives you more opportunity to add. When I'm doing foliage, I usually start with the foliage first, as you see here, and then the trunks. When you're doing the foliage, it's not necessary to show the branches as much. There you go. And if you want to, like I showed in previous tree videos, you can add some shading to give it some depth. That's really up to you. Alright everybody, that's my video on swamps. There's a lot more I could have covered and a lot more I will cover in the future. If you like my stuff, please like, share, spread it around, boost the signal. I really appreciate all your support and feedback. Comments are always read, and I am constantly thinking up new ideas based on those comments. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, keep drawing.